My stepfather said I'd never do anything, so I bought his business and fired him. When I was 17, my stepfather owned a small construction company, 3 trucks, a handful of workers, and enough arrogance to fill a stadium. He'd married my mother 2 years earlier, and from day one made it clear I was just extra baggage. "You're soft," he'd say during dinner, stabbing his meatloaf. "No work ethic. Your real dad spoiled you rotten." Every conversation was a reminder of my failures. Dropped out of football because of a knee injury? Weak. Chose art class over shop class? Waste of time. Got a B instead of an A? Disappointing. My mother would sit quietly, pushing food around her plate while he listed my shortcomings. She'd married him for stability after dad died, but stability came with a price. "Boys your age should be learning trades," he'd lecture. "College is for rich kids. You need to understand real work." Real work, according to him, meant showing up at his construction sites at 5 a.m. during summers. While his crew treated me like the boss's annoying stepkid, I watched everything: how they bid jobs, who they bought materials from, which clients paid late, which corners they cut. He'd point out my mistakes loudly, making sure everyone heard. "This is why I'll never leave you the business," he said one scorching July morning. "You don't have what it takes." I was cleaning tools while he screamed at a subcontractor over the phone. The guy owed him money for a bathroom renovation. As I listened, I realized something. My stepfather was terrible at business. He underbid jobs constantly. He used the cheapest materials and wondered why clients complained. He hired unreliable workers because they were willing to work for cash. His books were a disaster. That night, I started researching construction licensing requirements, building codes, material suppliers, industry standards. While he watched TV and complained about lazy workers, I was learning everything he should have known. By senior year, I had a plan. I'd been working weekends at a hardware store, saving every dollar. I learned about tool rental, equipment financing, and supplier credit terms. More importantly, I learned about customer service, something my stepfather had never heard of. The hardware store owner, Mr. Peterson, became my unofficial mentor. "Your stepfather's got a reputation," he told me one Saturday. "Not a good one. Customers come in here complaining about his work all the time." "What would you do differently?" I asked. He smiled. "Everything." The summer after graduation, instead of college, I applied for my contractor's license. My stepfather laughed when he found out. "You failed algebra twice," he said. "You think you can run a construction company?" "We'll see," I replied. 3 months later, I passed the exam on my first try. The next part required careful timing. I'd been watching his business deteriorate for months. Late payments from clients, angry suppliers threatening to cut off credit. His best worker had quit after not getting paid for 2 weeks. My stepfather was drowning, but too proud to admit it. Then I got the call that changed everything. Mrs. Davidson, an elderly woman across town, needed her kitchen remodeled. She'd hired my stepfather 6 months earlier. He'd taken her deposit and disappeared, leaving her with half-demolished cabinets and a gaping hole where her sink used to be. "I don't know what to do," she said when she called the hardware store looking for help. "I can't afford to hire someone else, and he won't return my calls." I drove to her house that evening. The kitchen was worse than she described. Crooked drywall, exposed electrical wires, and a floor that looked like it had been attacked with a sledgehammer. "How much did you pay him?" I asked. $12,000, she whispered. "My entire savings." That's when I knew exactly what I had to do. I spent the next week creating a detailed plan to finish Mrs. Davidson's kitchen. I got quotes from suppliers, calculated labor costs, and designed a timeline. The work would take 3 weeks and cost me $4,000 in materials, money I'd saved from the hardware store. "I'll finish your kitchen for free," I told her, "and I'll make sure you get your money back." She stared at me like I'd offered to fly her to the moon. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's the right thing to do." I started working on her kitchen the next Monday. 18-hour days, learning plumbing and electrical work from YouTube videos and library books. Mr. Peterson let me borrow tools and gave me advice when I got stuck. The first day was brutal. I'd ripped out all of my stepfather's shoddy work, walls that weren't plumb, electrical that wasn't up to code, plumbing that leaked. Starting over from scratch meant more work, but it was the only way to do it right. Mrs. Davidson brought me coffee every morning at 6 a.m., watching with amazement as her kitchen transformed. She'd tell me stories about her late husband, how they dreamed of renovating that kitchen for 30 years but never had the money. "He would have loved this," she said, running her hand over the new cabinets I was installing. "He always said a kitchen should be the heart of the home." As I worked, Mrs. Davidson shared more about her life. She'd been a teacher for 40 years, raised 3 children in this house, watched the neighborhood change around her. Her husband had been a mechanic who could fix anything but never had time to renovate their own home. "We always said next year for the kitchen," she told me while I installed new flooring. "Next year when we save more money. Next year when the kids are older. Next year when he retires." But next year never came. Her husband had died of a heart attack 3 years earlier, leaving her with Social Security and a small pension. The kitchen renovation was supposed to be her way of finally honoring their dream together. "That man," she said, referring to my stepfather, "he knew I was alone. He knew I didn't understand construction. He took advantage of that." By the end of the first week, neighbors were stopping by to see the progress. Word spread quickly in a small town. The kid was fixing what his stepfather had destroyed. Mrs. Henderson from next door pulled me aside on Friday afternoon. "Your stepfather did work for me last year," she said quietly. "Bathroom renovation. The tiles are already falling off and the shower leaks into my kitchen below." She showed me photos on her phone. It was worse than Mrs. Davidson's kitchen. "Would you look at it?" she asked. I can't afford another contractor, but I can't live with it like this. That weekend, I had 3 more calls. People who'd been burned by my stepfather's shoddy work, a deck that was literally collapsing, a basement that flooded every time it rained, an addition that was pulling away from the main house because the foundation was wrong. The Martinelli family had hired my stepfather to build a deck for their daughter's wedding reception. The deck had been completed 3 days before the wedding, but when guests started arriving, one corner gave way completely. 6 people fell through, including the bride's grandmother who broke her hip. The wedding was ruined, Mrs. Martinelli told me, tears in her eyes. But more than that, my mother spent 3 months in the hospital. She's 92 years old. I took detailed photos of every disaster, documented every code violation, calculated every dollar of damage. By Sunday night, I had a folder 3 inches thick of my stepfather's failures. But it wasn't just the shoddy work that bothered me. It was the pattern I was seeing. My stepfather targeted elderly people, single women, families who didn't know enough about construction to question his methods. He preyed on people who trusted him. Mrs. Davidson's kitchen was finished 2 weeks later, professional grade work that would have cost $15,000 from any legitimate contractor. She cried when she saw it. It's beautiful, she said, running her hands over the granite countertops I'd installed for the price of laminate. The transformation was dramatic. What had been a half-demolished disaster was now a showcase kitchen with custom cabinets, granite counters, new appliances, and lighting that made the whole room glow. I'd even added a small breakfast nook by expanding into an unused corner. Now for the second part, I said. That evening, I knocked on my stepfather's door. He answered in his undershirt, beer in hand, looking annoyed. What do you want? I handed him a folder. Inside were photos of Mrs. Davidson's kitchen, before and after, pictures of the other jobs he'd botched, a detailed list of building code violations, and copies of the complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau. What is this? He asked, his face reddening. Your reputation, I said calmly. Documented. He flipped through the pages, his expression changing from confusion to anger, to something that might have been fear. I'm starting my own construction company, I interrupted. And I'm going to fix every job you've screwed up. Starting with Mrs. Davidson. You can't afford that. Actually, I can. See, while you were drinking beer and complaining about your workers, I was building relationships. Mr. Peterson's investing in my company. So are 3 other local business owners who are tired of referring customers to contractors who rip them off. That was partially true. Mr. Peterson had agreed to co-sign a small business loan, and several shop owners had promised to recommend me. But the look on my stepfather's face made it worth the exaggeration. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and showed him a video. Mrs. Davidson, standing in her completed kitchen, giving a testimonial about the wonderful young man who fixed what his stepfather destroyed. This goes live on social media tomorrow, I said, along with the other testimonials I've been collecting. His hand tightened around his beer bottle. What do you want? I want you to return Mrs. Davidson's money. All of it. And I want you to refer all your future customers to me, since you can't handle the work anyway. Go to hell. Option 2, I continued, is that I post everything online tonight. The photos, the complaints, the code violations. Let the community decide whether they want to keep hiring you. We stared at each other for a long moment. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out if I was serious. You wouldn't destroy your own family. You're not my family, I said quietly. You made that clear years ago. He slammed the door in my face. I'd expected that. The next morning, Mrs. Davidson called me, crying with joy. My stepfather had shown up at her door with a cashier's check for $12,000. He said you'd convinced him it was the right thing to do, she said. Something like that. But that was just the beginning. Within a week, I'd started my own company, Davidson Construction, named after my first satisfied customer. I used the testimonial video as my first marketing piece, and it spread through town faster than I'd imagined. My phone rang constantly, people wanting estimates, asking about timelines, begging me to fix what other contractors had ruined. I hired Tommy Rodriguez first, my stepfather's best worker who'd quit over unpaid wages. You sure about this, kid? Tommy asked when I offered him the job. Starting a business is hard. Harder than working for someone who doesn't pay you? He laughed. Good point. Tommy brought experience I desperately needed. 20 years in construction, relationships with suppliers, knowledge of local building codes. In exchange, I offered him something my stepfather never had. Respect, fair wages, and profit sharing. Your stepfather never understood, Tommy told me as we worked on our first official job together. This business is about relationships. You take care of people, they take care of you. He thought it was about taking as much as you could get away with. Our first big project was Mrs. Henderson's bathroom. What should have been a simple tile replacement turned into a complete gut job when we discovered my stepfather had never properly waterproofed the shower. Water had been seeping into the walls for months, creating a mold problem that could have made the family sick. How did the inspector approve this? I asked Tommy as we ripped out rotted drywall. Your stepfather knows people, he said grimly. His cousin works for the county. Inspections were always flexible. That explained a lot, and it gave me an idea. I documented everything in Mrs. Henderson's bathroom with photos and detailed notes. Then I called the county inspector's office and requested a consultation. When Inspector Williams arrived, not my stepfather's cousin, his face went white. This is a serious code violation, he said, taking his own photos. This could have caused structural damage to the entire house. What happens now? I need to review all permits issued to the previous contractor, he said. If this is representative of his work, it was. Inspector Williams spent the next month re-inspecting every job my stepfather had completed in the past 2 years. 17 violations, 3 houses that needed immediate remediation for safety issues, 1 that had to be evacuated until repairs were made. The Martinelli family's deck wasn't just poorly built, it was dangerous. The support posts weren't properly anchored, the joists were undersized, and the connection to the house was barely holding. It was a miracle only 6 people had fallen through. This could have killed someone, Inspector Williams told me privately. If that deck had collapsed with a full wedding party, my stepfather's contractor's license was suspended pending a hearing. While all this was happening, my business was exploding. Word of mouth in a small town is everything, and satisfied customers tell everyone. Mrs. Davidson organized a coffee morning where she invited 12 neighbors to see her kitchen. 8 of them hired me on the spot. I was working 16-hour days, learning on the job, making mistakes but fixing them immediately. Unlike my stepfather, when I screwed up, I owned it and made it right at my own expense. The first mistake I made was on the Williamson family's basement renovation. I miscalculated the load-bearing requirements for a wall I'd removed, and the floor above started to sag. It was a $3,000 mistake that I fixed out of my own pocket, even though it meant I lost money on the job. Most contractors would have argued about it, Mr. Williamson told his neighbors later, but this young man just said, "That's my mistake, and I'll make it right." That's integrity. That reputation for integrity became my competitive advantage. In a town where my stepfather had burned bridges and broken promises, I became known as the contractor who kept his word. The breakthrough moment came 6 months later when the mayor called me personally. "We're renovating the community center," he said. "It's a big job, 40,000 square feet, full renovation. We've had 3 contractors bid on it. I'd be honored to submit a proposal." "Actually," he said, "after what happened with your stepfather's work around town, the city council voted. We want to hire you directly. No bid required." The community center project was massive. Built in 1952, the building needed everything. New electrical, plumbing, HVS, flooring, windows, and a complete kitchen renovation. It was a $280,000 job that would take 8 months to complete. I hired 6 more workers, rented additional equipment, and established relationships with major suppliers. The project would make or break Davidson Construction. My stepfather's business, meanwhile, was collapsing. His license suspension meant he couldn't bid on any legitimate jobs. His reputation was destroyed. His workers had all quit or been hired by competitors. The bank foreclosed on his trucks. I saw him one afternoon at the unemployment office. He looked older, defeated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen before: humility. He didn't see me, but I watched him fill out paperwork for benefits. Heard him tell the clerk he was willing to take any kind of work. The man who'd spent years telling me I'd never amount to anything was now desperate for any job at all. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt something unexpected: pity. The community center project became my proving ground. Every detail mattered, because the entire town would see the results. I worked alongside my crew, learning advanced techniques, pushing myself to deliver the best work possible. Midway through the project, we discovered a serious structural problem. The building's foundation had been compromised by decades of water damage. The safe solution would add $40,000 to the budget and delay completion by 6 weeks. "What do you want to do?" Tommy asked. "We could probably shore it up cheaper, get by for a few more years." "No," I said immediately. "We do it right. If I have to eat the extra cost, we do it right." I called the mayor and explained the situation. Instead of being angry about the delay and cost overrun, he was impressed by my honesty. "Most contractors would have found a way to make this our problem," he said. "The fact that you're recommending the expensive solution when you could have taken shortcuts tells me everything I need to know about your character." The city council approved the additional budget, and the project continued. During this time, my mother was watching my transformation with amazement. The angry, discouraged teenager who'd been crushed by his stepfather's constant criticism was becoming a confident businessman. "Your father would be so proud," she told me one evening as I showed her photos of the community center progress. "Which father?" I asked, not meaning to sound bitter. "Your real father," she said firmly. "The one who taught you that character matters more than profit." She was right. I learned more about integrity from my father's memory than from my stepfather's presence. The community center project was completed 2 weeks ahead of schedule and $15,000 under budget. The grand reopening made the front page of the local newspaper with a photo of me cutting the ribbon alongside the mayor. "Local young entrepreneur transforms downtown landmark," read the headline. That same week, my stepfather's former business partner called me. "I heard about your success," he said. "Congratulations. Thank you. Listen, I'm liquidating the assets from the old company. Tools, equipment, whatever's left. Would you be interested in buying any of it?" I drove to the warehouse the next day. Seeing my stepfather's tools laid out like a garage sale was surreal. These were the same tools I'd cleaned and organized as a teenager while he criticized my work. "How much for everything?" I asked. "$5,000 for the whole lot." It was worth at least $20,000, but liquidation sales are always brutal. Sold. As I was loading the tools into my truck, I found something that stopped me cold. A wooden toolbox with my real father's initials carved into the lid. These had been my dad's tools, the ones my stepfather had claimed after marrying my mother. Inside the toolbox was a folded piece of paper, A letter my father had written to me when I was 7, meant to be opened when I started working with tools. My mother must have hidden it there before my stepfather took over. "Son," it read, "by the time you read this, you'll be old enough to understand that building something with your hands is one of life's greatest satisfactions. It doesn't matter if you're building houses or building character. The principles are the same. Measure twice, cut once, use quality materials, take pride in your work, and remember that what you build today will last long after you're gone." I sat in that empty warehouse and cried for the first time in years. The letter continued. "I know I won't be there to teach you everything about construction, but I've left these tools for you. Everyone has a story. The level was my father's, your grandfather. The hammer was the first tool I ever bought with my own money. The measuring tape has been with me on every job for 15 years. Take care of them and they'll take care of you." There were detailed notes about each tool, stories about jobs he'd completed, advice about running a business with integrity. It was like getting a masterclass from beyond the grave. A year later, Davidson Construction employed 23 people. We'd renovated half the downtown area and built custom homes for 3 surrounding counties. The Better Business Bureau used us as an example of how contractors should operate. My stepfather found work at a big box hardware store, loading lumber for customers. Sometimes they were my customers, picking up materials for jobs I'd sold them. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. But my success was about more than just business growth. I'd started a scholarship program for kids who wanted to learn trades but couldn't afford technical school. The Real Work Scholarship, named after my stepfather's favorite phrase, had already helped 12 young people start careers in construction. Tommy Rodriguez had become my partner, owning 25% of the company. His experience combined with my vision had created something neither of us could have built alone. "You know what the difference is between you and your stepfather?" Tommy asked one day as we watched our crew working on a new project. "What?" He thought success meant being better than everyone else. "You think it means making everyone else better." One Tuesday morning, I was at the hardware store picking up supplies when I saw my stepfather in the lumber yard. He was helping an elderly man load plywood into a truck, moving slowly, favoring his back. The arrogant contractor who'd once bossed around crews was now taking orders from teenagers in orange aprons. He saw me and froze. "Hello," I said simply. "Hello," he replied, not meeting my eyes. The elderly man, Mr. Thompson, one of my regular customers, looked between us with confusion. "You two know each other?" "We're family," my stepfather said quietly. "Really?" Mr. Thompson's face lit up. "Then you must be proud. This young man renovated my entire first floor. Best contractor I've ever worked with." My stepfather's face went through several emotions. Pride wasn't one of them. "I'm sure he did good work," he said finally. After Mr. Thompson left, we stood in awkward silence. Finally, my stepfather spoke. "I heard about the community center job. News travels fast. And the new housing development you're building." I nodded. "Riverside Estates, 12 custom homes starting at $340,000 each. The biggest project Davidson Construction had ever undertaken." "I also heard," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "that you bought my old tools. Some of them were my father's." He nodded slowly. "I should have given those back to your mother years ago." "Yes, you should have." We stood there for another moment. I could see him struggling with something, the words forming and dissolving before he could speak them. "I was wrong about you," he said finally. "Yes, you were. I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. I needed to say that." I studied his face. The man who'd made my teenage years miserable looked genuinely remorseful. But remorse and forgiveness are different things. "What you expect doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is what you do next." "What do you mean?" "I mean you have a choice. You can spend the rest of your life feeling sorry for yourself, or you can try to become someone worth respecting." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll think about that." As I drove away, I realized something had shifted. The anger I'd carried for so many years was gone. Not because he'd apologized, but because I no longer needed his approval or his acknowledgement. I'd built something bigger than his small-minded vision of who I was supposed to be. The real test of my character came 6 months later when my stepfather showed up at my office. I was reviewing blueprints for the Riverside Estates project when my secretary buzzed me. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "He says he's your stepfather." I found him in the waiting room, looking uncomfortable in his hardware store uniform. He'd lost weight, and his face showed the strain of financial worry. "I need to talk to you," he said. We went into my office, a space that overlooked the downtown area we'd helped revitalize. From my window, you could see the community center, 3 houses I'd renovated, and the site where Riverside Estates was taking shape. "I need work," he said quietly. I looked up from the blueprints I was reviewing. 3 major projects lined up for the next month: a house addition, a commercial renovation, and a church basement that needed complete rebuilding. "What kind of work?" "Any kind. I'm not picky anymore." I studied his face. The man who'd spent years telling me I'd never amount to anything was now asking his stepson for a job. "Can you follow instructions without arguing?" He nodded. "Can you show up on time and work a full day without complaining?" Another nod. "Can you treat my other workers with respect, regardless of their age or experience level?" "Yes," he said, and something in his voice made me believe him. "The pay is $12 an hour. No benefits until you prove you're reliable. You'll work under Tommy Rodriguez. Remember him? The guy you fired for asking about overtime?" His face flushed, but he nodded again. "And one more thing," I said, standing up. You don't get to call me soft anymore, because everything I built it despite you, not because of you. He worked for me for exactly 3 weeks. The first week went well. He showed up on time, followed instructions, and kept his opinions to himself. The second week, old patterns started emerging, showing up 5 minutes late, questioning Tommy's decisions, making snide comments about how things used to be done. The breaking point came during the third week. We were working on a kitchen renovation for a young couple expecting their first child. My stepfather was helping install cabinets when the homeowner, Lisa, asked him about his experience. "I've been doing this for 25 years, he said. "I used to own my own company until my stepson here decided to play games with my reputation." Lisa looked confused. Tommy and I exchanged glances. "Actually," I said calmly, "you lost your license for code violations and your reputation for taking deposits and not finishing jobs." "That's not how it happened," my stepfather snapped. "You sabotaged me because you were jealous." The room went silent. Lisa looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. "I think you should leave," I said quietly. "You can't fire me for telling the truth. I'm firing you for lying to my customer and creating a hostile work environment. Tommy, please escort him out." As Tommy walked him to his car, my stepfather turned back. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," I replied. 3 months later, my mother called with news. "He's been going to AA meetings," she said. "Your stepfather, and anger management classes. Good for him. He asked if he could write you a letter. What did you tell him?" I told him that was between you and him. The letter arrived a week later. 3 pages of handwritten apology, taking responsibility for his treatment of me, acknowledging the damage he'd caused. At the end, he wrote, "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that watching you succeed, despite everything I did to discourage you, has been the most humbling experience of my life. You became the man I wish I could have been." I read it twice, then filed it away. Some wounds heal with time. Others become scars that serve as reminders. This felt like the latter. But the letter also included something unexpected. Information about 3 more families he'd ripped off before I'd started documenting his failures. He provided names, addresses, and details about what he'd done wrong. "I know I can't undo the damage," he wrote, "but maybe you can help them the way you helped Mrs. Davidson." I spent the next month reaching out to those families. The Kowalskis had paid him $8,000 to finish their basement, only to have him disappear after demolition. The Changs had hired him to build a deck that was never properly anchored to their house. The Rodriguez family, no relation to Tommy, had paid for a bathroom renovation that was left half-finished when he stopped returning their calls. Each family had given up hope of getting their money back or their projects completed. I offered to finish their work at cost, using my father's tools and the lessons I'd learned about doing things right. The Kowalski basement became a beautiful family room with proper insulation, electrical, and flooring. The Changs got a deck that could safely hold their entire extended family for barbecues. The Rodriguez bathroom was completed with attention to detail that exceeded their original expectations. Word of these rescue projects spread beyond our town. I started getting calls from neighboring communities where contractors had abandoned jobs or done substandard work. It became a specialized part of our business, fixing what other people had broken. Davidson Construction grew to employ 47 people across 2 counties. We opened a training program for young contractors, teaching them not just technical skills but business ethics and customer service. The program was endorsed by the State Contractors Licensing Board as a model for the industry. My stepfather continued working at the hardware store, and according to my mother, he was attending counseling regularly. He'd stopped drinking and was trying to rebuild relationships with his own children from his first marriage, relationships that had been damaged by years of his toxic behavior. One evening, I was working late in my office when I saw him through the window. He was walking slowly down the street, carrying a small bouquet of flowers. I watched him stop at Mrs. Davidson's house and ring the doorbell. Through her front window, I could see them talking. She invited him in, and they sat in her living room, the one adjacent to the kitchen I'd renovated, for about an hour. When he left, she walked him to the door and patted his shoulder gently. The next day, Mrs. Davidson called me. "Your stepfather came by last night," she said. "I saw. What did he want?" "To apologize, and to pay me back the interest I lost on my savings account while my kitchen was torn up for 6 months. How much? $300. It wasn't much, but it was what he could afford. He said he'd been saving it from his hardware store paychecks. How do you feel about that?" She was quiet for a moment. "I think people can change if they really want to. The question is whether they want to." Last month, Mrs. Davidson's granddaughter hired me to renovate her first home. As I was measuring the kitchen, Mrs. Davidson pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Your stepfather came by last week." My stomach tightened. "What did he want?" "He wanted to see the kitchen, the one you built." She smiled. I showed him around, and when we got to the kitchen, he just stood there for the longest time. Finally, he said, "That boy did good work." "What did you tell him?" I said, "That's not a boy anymore. That's a man who knows how to keep his word." "Okay," she paused, studying my face. He asked if I thought you'd ever forgive him. "What did you say?" I told him forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn. That evening, I drove past the hardware store where my stepfather worked. Through the window, I could see him helping customers, moving slowly but steadily. The man who'd once owned a construction company was now earning minimum wage, but he was showing up every day, doing the work without complaint. Maybe that was enough. Not redemption exactly, but accountability. That night, I called my mother. She'd divorced my stepfather 2 years earlier, after she finally saw who he really was, but they remained in contact because of their shared concern for his rehabilitation. "How was your day?" she asked. "Good," I said. "Mrs. Davidson told me something interesting." I repeated the conversation. "How does that make you feel?" she asked. I thought about it for a long time. The angry teenager who'd started this journey wanted revenge. The businessman I'd become just wanted success. But the man I was now, I wanted something different. "Satisfied," I said finally. "Not because he's struggling, but because I proved him wrong." "You did more than that," my mother said. "You became the man your real father would have been proud of." The conversation reminded me of something I'd been thinking about lately. Success isn't just about proving people wrong or building a profitable business. It's about creating something that makes the world a little better. Davidson Construction had become more than a company. It was a force for positive change in our community. We'd revitalized downtown, provided good jobs, and helped families create the homes they'd always dreamed of. We'd also shown that business could be conducted with integrity and still be profitable. The boy who was told he'd never amount to anything had built something that would outlast any individual success or failure. The company would continue long after I was gone, employing people, serving customers, and maintaining the standards of excellence and integrity that my real father had instilled in me through his letter. But more than that, I'd learned something my stepfather never understood. True success isn't measured by who you destroy on your way up. It's measured by what you build that lasts after you're gone, and by how many people you lift up along the way. Davidson Construction now has 52 employees and projects in 6 counties. We've built a reputation that extends far beyond our original town, but we've never forgotten where we started or why we started. My stepfather still works at the hardware store. Sometimes I see him there when I'm picking up supplies. We nod to each other now, politely but distantly. The anger is gone, replaced by something closer to acceptance. He's earned a certain respect from his co-workers for his knowledge of tools and materials. Customers seem to like him. He's become, in his small way, useful again. Last week, one of my foremen told me an interesting story. A customer had asked for help choosing the right screws for a deck project. My stepfather had spent 20 minutes explaining different options, recommending the best materials, and showing him proper installation techniques. "That old guy really knows his stuff," the customer had said, and he was really honest about what I needed versus what I wanted to buy. Saved me probably $200. Maybe that's enough redemption for anyone, becoming helpful instead of harmful, useful instead of destructive. Not everyone gets a grand comeback story. Sometimes the victory is just learning to show up and do good work without needing to tear others down. The scholarship program I started has now helped 47 young people begin careers in construction and related trades. 3 of them have started their own companies following the principles of quality work and ethical business practices. 2 months ago, I received an unexpected visitor. A young man named Alex, maybe 19 years old, knocked on my office door. "Are you the guy who started Davidson Construction?" he asked nervously. "That's me. What can I do for you?" "My stepdad works at the hardware store. He told me I should talk to you about your scholarship program." Something about the way he said stepdad caught my attention. "What's your stepdad's name?" "Richard Morrison. He said you two know each other." My stepfather. He'd been using his middle name at work, probably trying to distance himself from his reputation. "He said I should tell you my story," Alex continued, "about why I need help." Alex's story was heartbreakingly familiar. Alcoholic mother, absent father, stepfather who told him he was worthless and would never succeed. But unlike my situation, Alex's stepfather was physically abusive. "I've been living in my car for 3 months, he said, "couch surfing when I can. I want to learn construction, but I can't afford school, and I need to work to survive." "What did my stepfather tell you about the scholarship?" "He said you help kids who remind you of yourself, kids whose stepdads don't believe in them." Alex paused. "He said you'd understand what it's like to be told you're nothing." I stared at this young man, seeing myself at his age, angry, desperate, determined to prove everyone wrong. "He also said something else," Alex added quietly. "What?" "He said he hopes you're a better man than he was, and that maybe helping me would be a way for him to, I don't know how to say it, make amends?" "Yeah, that." I looked at Alex's application. Despite everything he'd been through, he'd maintained a 3.8 GPA in high school while working 2 part-time jobs. His shop teacher had written a recommendation calling him the most naturally gifted student I've ever taught. "When can you start?" I asked. "Start what?" "Work, school, both. We'll figure it out." Alex became our first live-in apprentice. We converted space above our main workshop into a small apartment, and he began splitting time between hands-on training with our crews and evening classes at the technical college. But more importantly, he became the first recipient of what I decided to call the Second Chance Scholarship, specifically for young people escaping toxic family situations. 3 weeks after Alex started, my stepfather showed up at the job site where Alex was learning to frame walls. "I wanted to see how he's doing," he said, watching Alex work alongside Tommy. "He's doing well. Natural talent." We stood in silence for a few minutes, watching Alex carefully measure and cut lumber under Tommy's guidance. "I heard what you named the scholarship," my stepfather said finally. "The Second Chance Scholarship?" "Yeah," he cleared his throat. That's generous. It's not about generosity. It's about giving people what they need to succeed." "Is that what you think I needed? A second chance?" I considered the question carefully. "I think everyone deserves a second chance, but they have to earn it, and they have to want it." "How do you earn something like that?" "By becoming someone different than who you were. By helping instead of hurting. By building instead of tearing down." He nodded slowly, still watching Alex work. He's good, he said. Reminds me of someone I used to know. Who? You, when you were his age. He trailed off. Before you what? Before I tried to convince you that you couldn't do it. It was the closest thing to a real apology I'd ever heard from him. Why did you send him to me? I asked. Because I saw how his stepfather talks to him, same way I talk to you. And I thought, maybe if someone had helped you back then, things would have been different. Things turned out fine. No thanks to me. We watched Alex and Tommy work for a few more minutes. Then my stepfather turned to leave. Thank you, he said quietly, for helping him. I'm not doing it for you. I know. That's what makes it mean something. 6 months later, Alex was one of our most promising apprentices. He'd moved out of the apartment above the workshop and into a small house he was renting with another young employee. He was talking about starting his own company someday, following the model we'd established. The transformation was remarkable. The angry, desperate kid who'd knocked on my door had become confident and skilled. He had a purpose, a future, and most importantly, people who believed in him. But the real surprise came when he asked to speak with me privately. I want to do something, he said. For your stepfather. What do you mean? He's been coming by the hardware store during my lunch breaks, just to check how I'm doing. And he's been giving me advice about tools, techniques, stuff like that. Okay. He knows a lot, more than I realized, and he's different than I expected. Different how? Nicer. Like he actually cares about whether I succeed. Alex explained that my stepfather had been quietly mentoring him, sharing decades of construction knowledge without being asked. He'd even helped Alex repair his car when it broke down, refusing payment. I think he's trying to be the person for me that he wasn't for you, Alex said. What do you want to do about it? I want to nominate him for the Mentor Award at the technical college. The students vote on it every year. It goes to someone in the community who helps people in the trades. I was speechless. The idea of my stepfather receiving an award for mentoring young people seemed impossible. Are you sure about this? He's helped me more than anyone except you and Tommy, and he's not getting paid for it. He's doing it because he wants to. The nomination required letters of support from students he'd helped. Within a week, Alex had collected testimonials from 6 different people my stepfather had quietly assisted. Some were formal apprentices. Others were young workers who'd sought his advice at the hardware store. Richard Morrison took time to teach me proper measuring techniques when no one else would, wrote one student. He stayed after work to show me how to read blueprints. I was struggling with electrical basics, wrote another. Mr. Morrison spent his lunch breaks for 2 weeks helping me understand circuits and safety procedures. The pattern was clear. My stepfather had been using his knowledge and experience to help young people succeed, the opposite of what he'd done with me. When the technical college announced the winner of the Community Mentor Award, I was sitting in the audience next to Alex. My stepfather's name was called, and he looked genuinely shocked as he walked to the podium. His acceptance speech was brief but heartfelt. I spent too many years tearing people down instead of building them up, he said. These young people taught me that it's never too late to choose differently. Thank you for giving an old man a chance to get it right. After the ceremony, he found me in the parking lot. Did you know about this? He asked, holding the plaque. Alex told me what he was planning. Why didn't you stop him? Because he was right. You've been helping people. That matters. He looked at the award, then back at me. I know it doesn't change anything between us. No, it doesn't. But it changes things for them. And maybe that's enough. Is it? Enough? I thought about his question for a long time. Was it enough for him to become a mentor to other young people? Could helping them make up for the damage he'd done to me? It's a start, I said finally. A year later, Davidson Construction celebrated its 10th anniversary. We'd grown to 73 employees and had completed over 500 projects. The company had become a cornerstone of the regional economy, and our apprenticeship program was being copied by contractors in other states. At the anniversary celebration, I gave a speech to our employees, clients, and community partners. I talked about the importance of integrity, the value of hard work, and the responsibility we all have to lift others up. But I also talked about second chances. 10 years ago, I was an angry teenager who'd been told he'd never amount to anything, I said. Today, we're celebrating what we built together. Not because we proved anyone wrong, but because we chose to build something right. In the back of the room, I spotted my stepfather. He'd come with Alex, who was now a foreman and part owner of the company. My stepfather looked older, grayer, but there was something in his expression I'd never seen before. Genuine pride. After the celebration, he approached me one last time. I won't keep bothering you, he said. I just wanted to say, what you've built here is remarkable. Your father, your real father, would be proud. Thank you. And I wanted you to know that Alex is talking about starting his own company, following your model, teaching young people while he builds his business. That's the point. The best way to honor what you've learned is to pass it on. Like you did for him. Like you did too. He looked surprised. I didn't teach him much. You taught him that people can change, that someone who made mistakes can still choose to help instead of hurt. That's not a small thing. We shook hands for the first time in 15 years. Take care of yourself, I said. You too. 5 years later, Alex opened his own construction company, Phoenix Building, named after the idea of rising from ashes. His first employee was a 19-year-old kid from a broken home, someone Alex found through the expanded scholarship program we'd developed. My stepfather continued working at the hardware store until he was 67, when health problems forced him to retire. He'd become genuinely beloved by customers and coworkers, known for his patience with beginners and his willingness to help anyone who asked. When he died 2 years later, the funeral was surprisingly well attended. Dozens of young people came to pay their respects. Apprentices he'd mentored, students he'd helped, workers he'd encouraged. Alex gave a eulogy about second chances and the power of choosing to become better. I sat in the back, processing complicated emotions. The man who'd made my teenage years miserable had somehow become a force for good in other people's lives. His redemption hadn't erased the damage he'd done to me, but it had prevented that damage from spreading to others. After the service, I found a letter he'd left for me with his attorney. It was brief. I know I don't deserve forgiveness and I'm not asking for it. I just want you to know that watching you succeed taught me what I should have been. I spent my last 15 years trying to become someone worthy of the son I never appreciated. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. The letter included something else, the deed to a small piece of property he'd owned, along with a note suggesting it might be perfect for a training center where young contractors could learn both technical skills and business ethics. Today, the Morrison Training Center, named after my stepfather despite everything, helps 200 young people every year begin careers in construction. It's run by Davidson Construction in partnership with 3 other companies that grew out of our apprenticeship program. The boy who was told he'd never amount to anything built an entire network of businesses focused on proving that everyone deserves a chance to succeed. The man who said those words spent his final years trying to undo the damage he'd caused. Some victories take decades to fully understand. This was one of them. Not because I destroyed him or because he found redemption, but because we both learned that the true measure of a person isn't their worst moment. It's what they choose to do after that moment. My stepfather chose to become better. I chose to focus on building rather than destroying. And somewhere in that choice, we both found a kind of peace. The company continues to grow, now employing over 100 people across 4 states. But the real success isn't measured in revenue or growth. It's measured in the young people who found purpose, the families who found homes, and the communities that have been rebuilt with integrity and care. That angry teenager who wanted to prove his stepfather wrong became a man who proved that success isn't about defeating your enemies. It's about transforming them into better versions of themselves. Sometimes that's the greatest victory of all.